It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by Ray White, the largest real estate and property group in Australasia.
And welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Podcast, available on iHeartRadio and also Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast from. Well, it's a Queen's birthday weekend. If you have another day off today, enjoy your Monday. It is June the 6th for 2022. And coming up, we're going to be talking about some legal stuff around asking your parents for help to get you into your first home. This isn't as cut and dry as it might sound, and if you are a parent wanting to help out a daughter or a son climb into the property ladder, there are some legal considerations you have to factor into the whole equation around the money that you're bringing in. So we'll take a look at that very shortly.
It's the Main Centre Forecast with propertybuyer.com.au.
And let's have a look at your weather around Australia. And first we go to Sydney, expecting a windy day and cloudy but dry and a high of 17 degrees. Melbourne expecting some showers today. Another cool one for your Monday morning. 13 is your high. Brisbane, possible rain in your forecast and a high of 21 degrees. And in Perth, it is a rain-free day. Plenty of cloud around and a high of 19.
Enjoy your morning coffee. Wake up every morning to the Real Estate Podcast.
Well, Rafael Nadal won the French Open overnight. He is a machine at 36 years young. Incredibly, it's the 14th time he's won the French Open and has now won 22 Grand Slam titles. And the victory comes 17 years to the day since he claimed his first French Open as a 19-year-old back in 2005. So congratulations, Rafa.
If you've got a question that needs answering, you can email us at myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com.
Well, we know that first home buyers have been struggling in the property market to gain a foothold into the market, and it's fair to say that without a lot of parents coming to the rescue and the negotiating table, a lot of these first timers would never be able to make the deposit required and to get into the property market, especially in property markets that have been running hot for 2 years like a Sydney market. And we know that there's a lot of emotion when it comes to getting into the property market, and there is an incredible relief when the parent decides to help out. But for the buyer, do they consider the various impacts a loan from a mum or a dad or both parents has? Well, let's welcome into the podcast this morning with a new podcast series called Property Contracts And Conveyancing, Sam Saad, who is a partner and owner of Clinch Long Woodbridge Lawyers at clw.com.au. Good morning, Sam. Welcome to the Real Estate Podcast.
Thanks, Craig. It's amazing to be a part of this podcast.
Yes, and it's great to have you on as a regular part of the podcast. We'll be talking every couple of weeks to help guide people through what can be pitfalls and tricky negotiations, not only with property contracts, but also the whole conveyancing aspect when purchasing and doing your due diligence. And a good starting point this morning, Sam, is for you to explain the typical scenario of what the bank of mum and dad looks like and how that arises.
Yeah, that's a good question, Craig. Today, it's been estimated that of loans made to help purchase a property in which the buyer will want to live in, over 50% of those loans are from the parents of those buyers, and those parents are giving a contribution in some way to help make the purchase happen. Those contributions are often called the bank of mum and dad, which most people are using these days, especially in this hot property market that we have. You know, notwithstanding that we have high interest rates, people are still looking to find a foot to get into the market. It was not that long ago that percentage was 15%, but now it's over 50%. And the average contribution these days is about $100,000 for anyone who does lend to their child. And that figure is only increasing with inflation and all other prices going up. The need for bank of mum and dad arises normally because banks will not lend to her first home buyers, even second and later home buyers, because of the level of finance that they require to buy that home that they want to buy. particularly in the Sydney market, is just way too expensive. This happens because banks have loan to valuation ratios they will not normally go beyond in making a loan. which is quite tough for first home buyers when they're trying to get in, or even people who are trying to get into commercial properties for the first time.
Gifting can be one of those areas that you have to be very careful in when deciding to do it. And on that note, can the parents gift the money but then ask for it back at a later date?
Well, Craig, there's two ways that these loans from mum and dad can be considered, and depending on which way they go will depend on what the parents can do with that money down the track. The first thing that parents need to think about with this money is whether they want to gift it to their children or whether they want to lend it. Lending means that they will generally have the right to ask for it back down the track, and a gift means you'll need to genuinely gift it with no right of return. But is that what your child's bank wants to see? I guess that's the question that parents need to consider in each situation that they lend money. Parents are often torn between the decision of losing their rights to that money in the future with their children in order to help their children get a head start, or the other side of things they need to consider is whether protecting their money and their children from a potential shrewd spouse by offering it to a loan to them. So there's two ways they need to think about as to which way to go.
And as I said at the top of the show, a lot of buyers are just so relieved that the parents are helping out, and the buyer might not know what the difference is between a loan and a gift. Let's cover that off because that's important.
Look, a loan means a bank may see it as another debt to your child that they need to repay in the future, which may reduce their serviceability on one side of the transaction. But the upside for parents here is that they have a better recourse to such money if something goes wrong or a child decides to gamble their house away down the track. However, in most instances, bank will need it to be a genuine gift with supporting documentation so that the bank knows that in the future, if something comes up, they have a recourse to that gift money that's been given, and it's not just another loan that the bank may sit behind in the event of a default. And that way, the child's not affected in the future by having to pay back that loan to the parents. The downside for that is for some parents, they'll not be able to see that money back in the future, and it unconditionally becomes their child's.
And Sam, what sort of things come into play from a legal perspective when a parent decides to help out their children? Because legally, if parents are operating as that type of bank, there are definitely things to take into consideration, right?
That's true, Craig. There's a lot of things that parents often don't consider when they go into these sorts of transactions. From a legal perspective, actually, these things have a lot of legal ramifications. One of the first things that they need to think about is if you're lending the monies to your children, do you have proper loan documents in place to protect you if you want to get that money back in the future? If you don't, your intentions of a loan and protecting your monies can come undone at a later point. It may be when your child gets into a marriage, gets into a relationship, they might even have a breakup. A lot of parents do not think about what actually happens when their children end up in a court over a divorce and their assets need to be split up. So it's important you think ahead to see what these ramifications are if you do lend some money to your children.
That is so true because from a parent's point of view, when you're giving the money, it's almost like the wedding itself. You're in that happy space, but that can unravel very quickly like a breakup and suddenly you're being exposed financially. And what about the whole aspect, Sam, of siblings? Is there any grey area with gifting one child and not the other?
If they have more than one child and they've gifted one child but not the other, what happens to the parent's estate in the event that the parents unexpectedly pass away? It's important for parents to consider their wills and distributions in their wills, and a lack of consideration for this aspect can lead to disputes between siblings at a later date. This is further magnified like when one parent gifts a child and not the others. For whatever reason, they may like one child in terms of the relationship they have with them, and the other one, they may not like their spouse and don't want to talk to them and don't want to give them anything. But that doesn't mean that there may not be arguments down the track for such issues. And the final thing that I think parents need to think about is, are they going to be guarantors for their children? And if they do, is that going to be the case instead of giving them money? Often parents come down to obtain independent legal advice and what the impacts are of giving a guarantee to their children. That can mean, that parent's properties and all of a sudden everything they have on the line is for their children. And if their child defaults on that loan, everything can be lost in the process. It's important that, asset structuring and protections in place before you decide to lend your children some money to, find their dream home and get a good start in the property market and future prospects.
You have covered off some really good points for us this morning, and I think a lot of parents are going to take away, those are some good points. Sam, thanks so much, and look forward to chatting in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.